Obama's running defense for the deep state as the FEC chairman actually comes out and says this election was illegitimate. Election fraud on an unprecedented level took place, and Joe Biden, the deep state, the Democratic leadership, the fake news, and the big tech are all part of it. They are colluding with foreign adversaries of this country in order to not only influence and cheat this election, but to stage a coup d'etat against the legitimate president, the legitimate government of the United States of America. This will not stand. The people will not have it. We're marching in the millions on D.C. today as I speak, with the millions in D.C. march, and we're going to turn this thing back. President Trump will win after the courts completely eviscerate all of the election fraud and disqualify the many millions of fake ballots that came through. Here we go. After a short word from our sponsors, all of this and more coming up.
There was a time when I had my head in the sand. Then I found out that power players pass lies for truth and truth for lies, especially in areas of life and health. I used to stay quiet, and now I speak up. I red pill my family, I red pill my friends, and I support redpillliving.com. Red Pill Living has real health products that support longevity, vitality, and detoxification against the deep state attacks on your health. It's redpillliving.com. Wake up, stand up, speak up.
One lawmaker in Australia placed that there's a lot of lockdowns lately, a lot of police state tyranny going on down there. However, Pauline Hanson is calling on the Australian government to boycott the Great Reset of the World Economic Forum. Now, this was blocked, but she still has a warning. She says that the Great Reset would destroy Australia's economy and, quote, push socialist and neo-Marxist policies, end quote, onto Australians, and, quote, pave the way for big controlling government, suppression of free speech, and reduced property rights, end quote. Just as I've warned you, they plan to give away all of that free helicopter money, that universal basic income, with just a few attachments, and those attachments will be complete dependency on a system that no longer allows you to have property. In fact, you will be the property. Hey puppy, how are you doing? All right, you come to see me. All right, anyway, back to the news. So moving on from there, Germany and France are both outraged over Russians' reciprocal sanctions of their top officials. Now, the Western powers are still sort of trying to keep Russia out of the game, away from the table, and they're trying to sort of frame up this Russia interference in the U.S. election narrative, because there's a few reasons here. The deep state doesn't like Russia. They threw out the central bank. They took it over, and they don't have any debt to the central bank system. They're a little smarter than that. They've been through this before. They dealt with the Bolshevik communist takeover, and they're a little wise to the ways of the color revolution. So they're sort of a threat to the George Soroses of the world just by virtue of existing, because they are a living example of what not to be like. You know, they're doing organic food. They're going to actually become the world's largest exporter of organic food, whereas most Western nations are just poisoning our people, right? So it doesn't make any sense. But one of the ways in which they've been doing this is to try to pretend that one of Putin's critics or competitors, which was virtually unheard of and unknown before, suddenly was poisoned on the word of Putin himself. Now, this is the kind of, weak argument, bogus kind of narrative that you would see with like Assyria chemical weapons, right? This is something meant to create a narrative, but it doesn't really hold up to logic. It doesn't hold up to investigations. In fact, they won't even let Russia have a say in the investigation or see some of the facts or have access to the witnesses or anything. So this is interesting that finally Russia is actually going to push back a little bit against Germany and others, which it is a weird, I don't even really know how to explain it. All I know is that Germany is playing both sides against each other at the moment. Kind of a long-time U.S. ally, but at the same time, they are switching to the eastern Russian oil pipelines. There's that new one that's about to be completed. I don't know if that's going to even be finished at this point. But there's a lot of geopolitical maneuvering around not only that pipeline and the fact that Russian oil will be pouring into Europe competing with U.S. oil, everything else that's going on. But there's just a very tense situation there. Angela Merkel, clearly not an ally of President Trump or the United States, or even of her own people in Germany. I mean, the deep state owns Germany right now, and there's no freedom of speech there, really. Now, I also want to mention that Trump is eyeing launching a media empire after his presidency in 4 more years to wreck Fox. This is going to be epic. I hope they just call it Trump News, because it's going to dominate about 80% of the news in the United States. I can already see it. I'm going to be out of business, unfortunately. Now, I love New York. This is from President Trump on Twitter. He says, I love New York. As everyone knows, the Trump administration has produced a great and safe vaccine far ahead of schedule. Another administration would have taken 5 years. The problem is, New York Governor Cuomo said he will delay using it, and other states want it now. We cannot waste time and only give to those states that will use the vaccine immediately, and can only give to those states that will use the vaccine immediately, and therefore the New York delay. Many lives to be saved, but we are ready when they are. Stop playing politics. So this is a very interesting thing, because they've been using this COVID as a weapon, and they have been trying to even cast doubt on the vaccine, because they don't want society to reopen. They don't want you to lose the fear, and that's one of the things that the vaccine for a lot of people would do. Now, of course, you guys know, if you've been watching this show, vaccines are poison, and that includes this one. There is no long-term safety studies, especially on the most rushed vaccine in the history of vaccines, right? But President Trump is an anti-vaxxer, so why the hell is he sitting here saying that we will have a great and safe vaccine far ahead of schedule? Clearly, I believe, at least, that he is trying to bring the economy back. He's trying to reopen society, and he understands that once that happens, they've lost, and the vaccine won't matter anymore. Most people are not going to take it anyway, and the few people that want it will be able to have it. The people that don't want it will not be forced to take it, and that, I believe, is why President Trump, having made multiple promises not to mandate a vaccine, is using the military to distribute the vaccine. We're going to use the military, once again, just like in New York and in California with those hospital ships and the tent hospitals. We're going to use the military to increase transparency in the Democrat playground. And we're going to do it this time. First, I'll go back to New York and California. Remember, they were putting sick people into nursing homes and killing tens of thousands of largely Republican elders. Right? There's signs hanging from bridges with tarps saying, Cuomo killed my mom, or Cuomo killed my grandma, that kind of thing. Okay, now what President Trump did, he couldn't just order them to stop because they're the governors of their states, right? There's a division. What he did instead was he brought attention to the fact that they were intentionally ignoring open hospital beds in order to stick sick people into nursing homes. Now, that is a brilliant move, even though it cost a bunch of money, wasted the military's time, and they had to build a bunch of useless hospitals that we didn't use or barely used, right? Most of those beds remain empty. They only had a couple of hundred. Some of those hospitals were torn down with never even being used. Many volunteer nurses from across the United States and in the military were not given patients. They were just set in hotels and told to wait. Now, that is exactly, I think, what President Trump is going to do on this vaccine, on this issue, using the military as a distributor, right? He's going to go around not only the corrupt U.S. Postal Service, I guess, but since they're usually the distributors, but he's going to go around the corrupt big pharma medical establishment, like the Faucis of the world, right? And we are going to see massive transparency. And whatever they're going to try is going to fall apart under so many eyes. That, I believe, is why President Trump is promising to use the military to distribute the vaccines, right? A lot of people think he's going to use it to force the vaccines on us, and that's where most governments would have gone, frankly. And that's where Joe Biden's government is openly talking about right now, because he wants to assume control and force a vaccine on us all and force us into this system. We're not going there. It's not going to happen, but that's what the Biden campaign, sort of the Biden, what is it, the fake office of the president-elect, whatever that means, they're trying to talk about this already, setting policy, hiring, nominating people for a transition and a new cabinet that will never make it into the government. Now, I want to mention that everyone knows already about Dominion. You've heard that name. It's a company that was deeply involved in election fraud. There are many companies like that out there, and they sort of all work together and they all sort of do similar things. It is important not to get caught up in just one of them. But another one that's involved is Seidel. And Seidel had a company website crash right after they reportedly released a statement saying that, oh, there was no German raid on our servers. Now, Gomer said that he heard a rumor, saw a tweet. I don't know if he's, backing it up or not, but it sounded pretty solid. A lot of people assume that this actually happened already, that the U.S. military did indeed raid and seize servers in Germany. Check this out, though.
Election, he needed to just give up. But Seidel, that's a place where all of this information was cycling through. Not supposed to, but it was. And actually, there was a German that, as I was told, there was a tweet in German from Germany that the U.S. Army had gone in and seized the Seidel server. They're going through bankruptcy right now. So there's all kinds of games being played. And I had suggested that the president might get information from Seidel, and the next day before, and I sent him specifics that he needed to get that would show a lot of fraud. And the next day before that information could be gotten, somebody ordered the U.S. Army, according to the tweet, to go in and seize the server. There are people involved inside the government that have been trying to take this president down, State Department, Intel community, and FBI, and also.
It even almost sounds as though he's saying that someone used the military to get there before Trump. I don't know. This is a rumor, right? This is based on a tweet. However, Trump's new attorney, Lin Wood, who I've mentioned often because he's a super lawyer and well-respected and very powerful in his legal circles, Biden and his criminal cronies are not going to sleep well tonight. Well, Biden might, because he probably forgot the name Seidel. His co-conspirators know the name well. They also know the name Paragon, company which purchased Seidel in 1020. I'm assuming he meant to say lie, will be revealed. I don't know why it opened, but there's a little bit of a typo or something going on there. Now, I don't know if this is 100% true. I'm letting you know because it is really important if it is true. Now, continuing from there. Did the U.S. raid the European software company Seidel and seize their servers in Germany? The company is refuting the claim. And then their website crashed, right? So it's evolving. We also have Obama saying that it's wrong, that millions of people are questioning the election results, and he is, of course, blaming Trump. Isn't that fear? That is fear, folks. That is fear. He is afraid that the plan has failed, that the deep state plan failed, and he is going to prison for treason and for many other crimes. Now, I also want to bring up that in 2019, not even that long ago, Senators Warren, Klobuchar, and Wyden, which are not friends of Trump and they're not friends of the Republican Party, they're crazy Democrats, right? I don't even know Wyden, but I know Warren and Klobuchar, Pocahontas and Klobuchar. Anyway, these are some of the most outspoken deep state politicians against the president and against Republican interests and against your freedoms. But in 2019, they had an issue with Dominion voting systems. Oh my gosh. They said, quote, "These problems threaten the integrity of our elections," end quote. Oh, but I thought the fake news told us there was no such thing as election fraud and that this was the most secure election in the history of all elections. But right after the last 4 years where they were telling us that foreign countries were interfering on our elections and we had to stop them. You can't keep up with all the lies, and that is why it works. That is the only reason that it still works. That is the only reason they still have power, because the lies are so damn confusing at this point. No one wants to bother to keep up with them. Oregon, and some people can't. Some people literally cannot keep up with all this because it is just too much. And I don't blame them. But they operate within that space of our ignorance. They have power directly proportional to the ignorance of the people that are underneath them. The more ignorant you are, the more power they have. That's why they don't like the Great Awakening. We've already taken a big chunk of that power away just by looking, just by sitting up and paying attention. And that is the Great Awakening. and that is the citizen journalist movement, of which I'm a part of, and many of you are now a part of as well. We're out there spreading the truth despite the fake news and big tech. We're under occupation, effectively. Our nation is occupied by foreign adversaries that have controlled our media. They have controlled our communications, our big tech platforms, and they have controlled large elements of our government to the point where they just tried to cheat a national presidential election in plain sight, and they barely got caught. And only under President Trump would they have gotten caught. Everything else, or anyone else, would have conceded and backed down and pulled a Bernie Sanders. Now we have Governor Kate Brown in Oregon ordering new lockdowns and says they will be enforced by police. We have Fauci showing the Pfizer COVID vaccine results to Biden before Trump. In fact, the White House, many of them at the White House, found out about this supposed breakthrough from Pfizer, right, which was actually held. They kept it close to the chest until right after the election, and then they released it, which was really unethical and a real attack on President Trump, which is not a shock, but he did give them a $2 billion deal. You think that there would be some sort of a gratuity or gratitude there. But the White House found out about this from the media, okay? And that is because Fauci is pretending that Biden is the legitimate president, and he is going to him first with information. Now, DHS Secretary Chad Wolf defies President Trump, refuses to fire cybersecurity chief Krebs, who missed massive fraud in this year's election. In fact, this goes a little bit deeper, but first of all, I want to just mention that Chad Wolf is committing treason by doing this. He is refusing an order from the president. Secondly, I want to mention that Krebs recently put out, through his office, a very interesting statement that basically said it was the most secure election in the history of the United States. I want to find that real fast for you. Let's see. Right here. Okay, so this CISA and former Microsoft executive, CISA official and former Microsoft executive had recently said this: November 3rd election was the most secure in American history. This is from a CISA panel. Now, we know CISA was an Obama-era organization that was really more to control elections through fraud than it was to prevent it. But, we'll just mention it. Infrastructure Security Agency. These are the kind of things that Obama did to go around our usual constitutional limitations. He started to have czars and agencies, and he started to weaponize the systems against us, right? Saw that with the IRS targeting conservatives, Tea Party. Now, I just wanted to mention that after Secretary of Defense Esper was fired, we then had this sort of refusal to fire him, which is treason, in my opinion. I don't know if that rises to the level of treason or to what degree President Trump, told this guy, do this now, or if it was just sort of a polite requested letter from the White House. Maybe now they're going to send a more strongly worded one. But this won't last. I imagine they're just going to fire him too. That's what I would do. And I think President Trump is done playing games now. You can't play games much longer, or we'll lose. So he has to act now. And that's why he will. I'm thinking logically that he will. Again, Obama, I already saw that when Obama's not happy that we are all counting the audits and questioning his fake election results. The Georgia recount, however, may be as corrupt as the election itself. They're trying to cheat this thing. We need people in Georgia to push back and pay attention. Get your governor on this, and he's probably on their side, but put the pressure on. The FEC chairman makes explosive pronouncement. This election is illegitimate. The chairman of the Federal Election Commission, okay? That's the Federal Election Commission. This is what they do. Now, it's going to be difficult for the fake news to spin that, but they're going to just keep saying it has no evidence, and it's just a fake news lie from President Trump, and it's just, CNN's calling him another crackpot on the internet, right? To our president, calling our president just another crackpot on the internet after he steps out of office, which they think is going to happen in January. Lynn Wood, again, filing a lawsuit challenging Georgia's Secretary of State's dark, unconstitutional agreement with Hillary attorney Mark Elias, who's basically helping to run the Democrat election fraud, in my opinion, across the country. He's sort of one of Hillary's minions. Now, this lawsuit is going to hopefully help to overturn what is happening in Georgia. Linwood is a major player. Hopefully he can get stuff done. Now, I also wanted to mention that this video, very interesting, about election security expert Russ Ramsland talking about how easy these things were to change. Just a few days, I think, before the election itself, how easy it was to change these votes.
Basically, what most Americans don't understand is that voting is done by private companies. The elections are conducted by private companies under contract from the county. And we went in and started looking at these private companies and their software and their security, and we realized, first off, there are no security standards. So there are no national standards that any voting company needs to meet as far as the security on their software. And as a result of that, we then began to look and we realized how easy it is to change votes. The software is so bad you can easily change the audit trail so that later you cannot even forensically go back and find out the votes that were changed. And that led us to a number of areas. One, we said, well, what happens to your vote after whatever the voting company locally does to it? What happens to it? Well, it turns out in the case of Texas and 28 other states, it all goes to a server in Frankfurt, Germany, which is owned by Barcelona, Spain multinational, and that's who actually controls and reports your vote.
I got to jump in. So here in
So we're getting into the Dominion and all of these other rigged ways in which they cheat the election. But I just want to mention how he talked about how even the audit would fail because they destroy the actual information trail as well. Now, talking about diving into these companies, 96% of Dominion Voting Systems political donations went to Democrats. That tells you a lot about the people that work there, doesn't it? Now, I also want to mention that Kanye's Michigan votes were actually stolen by Joe Biden, according to a witness. I'm not shocked. Kanye wasn't really a legitimate player in this race anyway. He was never going to win. But the fact that he had his votes also stolen by Joe Biden creates it's not a Joe versus Trump issue as much as it is an America versus Joe issue, right? This is not President Trump trying to change the election. This is President Trump and the country standing up for legitimate elections, or we'll never have one again. If they win here, if they win now, they win forever. We fall forever. We'll never take it back. Not in our lifetimes. And we'll never have the Constitution again. Not in our lifetimes. So someone else in the future, maybe one day, will take inspiration from it if they can dig it up from all of the buried history that they're going to rewrite. Maybe. But we will lose our Constitution if Joe Biden becomes president. It's guaranteed. He's already promised, basically, to do it. I also want to mention that we did all of this entire election. Everything that just happened last couple of weeks was under a national emergency declaration from President Trump. And this set an election day trap for the, quote, unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure. Remember that national emergency declaration that President Trump kind of quietly put out there through executive order? I covered it. We covered all of his executive orders, many of them. Great things that he did, draining the swamp, increasing quality of education by draining the swamp. But at the same time, a lot of it was about securing our infrastructure, or securing our vote, or securing our country, or stopping child trafficking. These are the kind of things that President Trump was focused on. But this particular one did set a trap. And this particular trap could be a big deal. Now, I'm going to briefly go through this because it's kind of a recap of what we've just been through. But we know that there was the part about the unauthorized accessing of election infrastructure. That was in the executive order. Now, we know that Dominion Voting Systems is a Canadian company, and Seidel is run out of Spain. That makes this a foreign interference issue, doesn't it? So we also have Dominion. Let's see, where was the next part I wanted to show you? Yes, it does allow for the seizure of assets. So any of these companies, any of these individuals that were involved in election fraud could have their entire wealth and assets seized by the government. Remember that one? That was actually a different executive order, but I think he mentioned it again in that one. But either way, treason, corruption, child trafficking, human trafficking, these are the kind of things that can get your assets taken from you by the U.S. government now. thanks to President Trump. I'm not usually a fan of civil asset forfeiture, but in this case, they're probably going to prison anyway. They won't need that money. So I also want to mention that Sidney Powell is threatening to release the Kraken on these election fraud companies, and she has staggering statistical evidence and also staggering witness testimony. These are quotes from her. If you want to talk about a foreign election interference, we certainly have it now, she said. Now, I also want to mention that we had that Representative Louis Gohmert, who just said that the U.S. military raided the server farm in Spain and Germany. Now, here's another thing, though. Gohmert, he may be wrong about this, he may be right about this, it doesn't matter, but Gohmert had a friend killed by the deep state not that long ago. He's the real deal. He's mad, and he wants to take them out. I think he's going to be one of President Trump's strongest allies and supporters, and he has been. Now, the raid appears to have targeted the CIA's Frankfurt server farm operation. A lot of CIA activity around there, a lot of shell companies, a lot of sort of the spook world stuff that's happening there. Even the German daily, I don't know how to pronounce that, reported the building was known to be home to a vast network of intelligence personnel, including CIA agents, NSA spies, military Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security, and Secret Service, and that the Americans had established a dense network of outpost and shell companies in Frankfurt. So the CIA was not involved in this because, well, this was probably their servers that was raided, if it happened, that were raided, if it happened at all. Now, and there's the part we just went through with Lynn Wood again. So you're seeing a lot of this has fallen into place, I would say. And that's why Obama's out there now fighting so hard to try to really get this thing across the finish line. And poor Joe is just hiding in his basement, can't even keep up. Going down, big tech, media giants, and Democratic operatives, and half the deep state. And I also want to mention, Mike Adams brought this up on his article here from Natural News and Brighteon. And if you haven't seen the interview I did with Mike, check that out. I've done 2 interviews with him recently, and they were really great. But you know, he's on the fence about Q. He knows about it, but he doesn't follow it, and that kind of thing. So I like to give his audience some optimism, right? Like, we've expected all this. We've talked about it for months. We knew what was coming. Let's calm down. We're winning. It's okay. Just breathe. And that's kind of the message I wanted to bring. But the recounts don't really matter anymore. And you know, although it does matter for optics, it does matter so that people know President Trump won by a landslide. But that's not how he has to win. He could win that way, but if it doesn't go that way, the certification of the votes itself could be thrown out. And this has happened in the past. I think the New York Times even reported on it last time the Democrats had an election overturned by the courts and was actually just given to the Republican because they forfeited their race by losing it. So that could happen. It could go to the House in such a way that the Constitution allows each state to have one representative vote, and that's going to go the Republicans' way, because even though the House may be majority, and I'm talking about the new House, which picked up like what, extra plus 12 House seats for Republicans so far. So every state, majority Republican, would get a single vote, and they would get a single vote as to who becomes president. Now that's another way that President Trump could win. The Supreme Court, you know, is another option as well. So there's a lot of ways in which Trump can still win this thing and will still win this thing. So with that said, I hope that you have found this to be of value. I think that's all of the major things that I really wanted to cover. We're going to win this thing. We are winning this thing. That's why they're freaking out. That's why if you go to fake news right now, it's nonstop insults, panic, harassment. They're calling Parler a national security threat because everyone is leaving Twitter and Facebook and their lies, and they're going to places like Parler. Like people, I love capitalism because the free market, the ability to just go somewhere else with your business is going to destroy big tech, fake news, Amazon, and the Democrat Party. And a lot of these get woke, go broke companies like Nike, Starbucks, and others that stood up to our president, and Pfizer, all of them, they're going to be hurt a long, long time economically for what they've done. They may even be destroyed by it. You might not break a Google by destroying their reputation, but you're certainly going to take market share, and that's going to build up new better options and new winners that maybe we can trust. Maybe not. But not Google, not fake news, not big tech. Never again. And I think that people have learned that lesson. So I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm still cautious. I'm still preparing for the worst just in case, but I'm hoping for the best. This is Dustin Nemos out. Please share this video if you can. Support us at nemosnewsnetwork.com if you can. We'll see you on the next one.